You're listening to Beyond Insights, your go-to podcast for all things accounting, business, and technology.
From cybersecurity and AI innovations to sustainability and work-life balance, we've got you covered.
We host insightful guests from different backgrounds, industries, and locations all around the world.
From this diversity of thought, we aim to find solutions to some of our most pressing business problems.
Thank you for tuning in. Let's dive right in and go beyond insights.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's episode of the Beyond Insights podcast. Today we are joined by Travis Sinclair, who is a systems consultant based in Durban, South Africa. Travis is a specialist in many different software solutions and is one of our more prolific students on Syft Campus. He is primed to recommend the best products for an organization and to help sell and install and give training on these products. He can also set up products in order to optimize efficiencies and provide ongoing support. So thanks so much for joining us today, Travis.
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's my first podcast that I've ever been on, and I'm looking forward to inspiring the audience and giving them a little bit of my insights.
Amazing. So maybe we can start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started working in system consulting.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started with a degree in finance and investment management, but the subject that I hated the most, you'll be surprised to learn, was accounting. I hated it so much that I actually changed my degree so I didn't have to do it.
Wow.
It was most probably the lecturer. And also I probably didn't put in as much effort as I should have. So I ended up doing a degree in economics and econometrics. And for those that don't know, econometrics is a mix of statistics and mathematics. And then you use economics to forecast what will happen in the economy. So now, of course, ironically, most of my days are spent doing accounting and working with accounting programs. And it's got to the point where I even have chartered accountants asking me questions about accounting. So how did I get into systems consulting? Well, when I was back in high school, I used to work at Siemens in my school holidays, and I used to repair computers, laptops. And I also had an introduction there to internet security because one of my jobs was to remove viruses from infected computers. So I had a bit of an IT background right from the very beginning in high school. And then in university, I worked for my grandfather's company on weekends, and I helped out with his accounting, especially the month-end processes, doing statements, invoices, capturing receipts, and preparing the age analysis. So I had a very early introduction to accounting as well. And that's exactly what you need to do my job. You need accounting knowledge as well as IT knowledge. So from very young, I worked on both of those systems. My first job was at Unilever, where I worked as a planner, making sure there were enough raw materials to meet the manufacturing demand for margarine. So Rama, Flora, Rondo, those kinds of things. And that's where I learned all about stock management, warehousing, and manufacturing. I was then poached or hired by one of Unilever's suppliers, Kerry Ingredients, in Joburg, which is where I was born, Joburg in South Africa. And my title was a rather interesting one, Business Enablement Coordinator. And my job was basically to improve the profits of the company in any way possible. So I had a very broad job description. And as part of my job, I worked on the accounting systems, on their reports, and I optimized their reports. I even helped set up a test bakery. I worked on their CRM systems, on Salesforce. I became a Salesforce trainer, and I trained their staff in Durban, Cape Town, and Joburg. I also worked with freight companies on transfer pricing and on freight costs, and eventually relocated to Durban, and my job description was changed to accountant.
Wow.
And in Durban, I was put onto the SAP or the SAP implementation team, and I had training for that product in Ireland. And it was around that time, soon after I relocated to Durban, that I started attending a church here, and I knew someone from that church who seemed to have a good lifestyle. He had time for his family. He made quite a bit of money. He seemed to work for himself and he had control of his time. I knew he was some kind of business consultant, but I wasn't really sure. So I approached him and I asked him what he did. And he said that this was a really good time for me to have approached him because he had some overflow work and he was looking for someone to give that to. So he said I could come through one evening and speak to him about it. So my fiance at the time and I went to his house. She's my wife now. And he explained that he was a business consultant and he sold, implemented, and trained accounting systems, especially pastel accounting. Now, bear in mind, this was over 10 years ago in 2014, before the rise of cloud accounting software. He worked with two others, and all of them had their own clients and they all worked independently. And he said he could show me what he did, I could do the same, and he could send some overflow work to me. So I resigned from my full-time job and started to work on this business. And I started in March in 2014. And that was a strategic decision because I knew a lot of companies would be doing their year-end processes at that time. And so I would have a bit of work to start me off. Now, bear in mind that I was engaged and we were going to get married in May. So here I was in March, starting my own company and getting married in May. I had about a 6-month runway. I had enough money to sustain me for that long. And in month 5, I started to worry that I wasn't making enough money to sustain myself. And I started to apply for jobs. But in month 6, I got a big client. They signed a retainer and things took off. And so things have changed significantly since 10 years ago. And I now support not only Pastel, but Sage's online accounting software, Xero, QuickBooks, as well as several other pieces of related software. Several years ago, I realized I needed help myself and started to have my own work, my own overflow work, especially around reporting. So I contacted a previous colleague at Kerry Ingredients, who I knew had exceptional reporting and Excel skills, and he agreed to help me with that extra work I had. And I also support various payroll systems. And in the last 10 years, I've become a tax practitioner. I'm a member of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals, and my company also offers an outsourced payroll service. And so as we started supporting more cloud accounting software, the need to write reports started to fall away, and we decided to rather refer clients to Syft, while at the same time growing our payroll department. And so we've now started employing even more payroll administrators as the number of our payroll clients increases. And so that's where we are at the moment and how I became a systems consultant.
That's a really cool story. I always love to hear when people don't just have sort of a straight path. Like, I always knew this was what I was going to do, and then I went from A to B, and that's the story. You see, I can also relate because I've had a bit of a strange path to end up working at Syft myself, starting studying film and then English literature. And now here I am at an accounting software company with no accounting background. So it's really cool to hear your story and yeah, to see the amazing growth that you've seen over that time, taking that big leap and finding, oh, actually, there's a lot of work that can be done in this area. And yeah, so much that you can do with software implementation.
That's right. You know, I decided to take the leap just before I got married and before I had kids, because I knew by the time I had kids, it would be very difficult to start my own business.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I decided just to take the leap, and I'm so glad I did.
So what are some of the sort of key areas or learnings that have brought you to this career, and where are you still learning today?
So yeah, I've learned throughout my last 10 years. As you said when you introduced me, I go on to the Syft Campus and I do a lot of courses. And one of the things that I like to do each day is I try and do a bit of learning each day. So each day I spend 10 to 15 minutes doing a bit of learning, whether it's on Syft Campus or on other free course sites. And that has stood me well throughout my career. And that's something I would advise for all the listeners to do, is to do a bit of learning each day and to turn your car into a university. So when you're driving from place to place, instead of listening to the radio or listening to music, although it is fun to do that sometimes, listening to an educational podcast is a really good way and a really profitable way to pass the time. So that's definitely a piece of advice I would give to everyone. And yeah, I can say that throughout my life, I've always worked with software, with hardware, and then with accounting. And all of my experience has combined to put me in the situation I'm in today, where my job kind of fits in between an IT professional and an accountant. So I need some IT knowledge as well as accounting knowledge to do what I can do. And yeah, so the various jobs I've had have put me into the perfect position to provide my clients with an optimal service.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And obviously, I work a lot on Syft Campus, so I always see your name when you're enrolling in courses. And I think it's so great to actually take that time every day to learn new things. And also the idea of these 10-minute increments, I think, is really great. It's really doable for most people. You don't have to be overwhelmed and think, oh, I'm going to sit down and do like this 2-hour course. No, it's actually very doable if you just do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you have. I often, when I'm cooking or washing the dishes, I'll also listen to educational podcasts. So like there is time in the day. You just have to think about sort of optimizing your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also listen to podcasts when I'm washing the dishes.
Definitely makes washing the dishes more bearable.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about it, 10 minutes a day works out to about an hour a week. And that is 4 to 5 hours a month, and it all compounds.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, you spend so much time learning that you wouldn't otherwise have done.
And I think especially when it comes to systems, when it comes to technology, things change so rapidly that you do actually need to be constantly learning.
That's very true, especially when you're working with in the field of technology and in systems. You've got to be on top of your game. You can become obsolete very quickly, especially with the rise of cloud technology. If you're still looking at on-premise software and haven't investigated cloud technology, you could be left behind very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess on that note, let's turn to the topic of our podcast today, which is systemizing your business. I thought maybe we could start with, what does it mean to systemize your business, and why is it a good idea for businesses to do that?
So systemizing your business means putting in a consistent program or a process that can be run on a routine basis. So to systemize is to put processes in place, and that will save time. And systemizing something takes the thinking out of a process so that the business owners or those within the company can put more of their resources into strategic areas. So it automates routine tasks and ends up saving money. It's to take a system that works and to replicate it. So someone who wants to systemize their business should put a process in place so that anyone who starts working in the company can basically pick up a manual, follow the process, and achieve the desired results.
Yeah, it makes sense. Once you've figured out how to do something, when someone else needs to take that over, you don't want them to sort of start from scratch and not know what to do. If you have something in place for them to follow, that makes it a lot easier for them to get going.
Exactly. They can learn from your mistakes. So you've learned the correct way to do it. You've spent the time making the mistakes and optimizing the way to do it. So they don't have to go through that whole process again. They can basically pick up your learnings and take it from there.
Brilliant. And for business owners who may be concerned about sort of losing their creativity or restricting themselves by systemizing, what would you say?
So Alex, I'd say that systemizing business does exactly the opposite of that. It frees time to allow for creativity. It doesn't take away creativity. It takes away the mundane and it automates it. So rather than restricting someone, putting a system in place frees up a person's time and energy. So in practical terms, I can perhaps compare it to taking all your ideas and writing them down, or putting some structure into your creativity. It's kind of like taking your plans that are in your head and writing them down. It orders things so that you can see the patterns and recognize where you can improve, perhaps where you're doing well, what you need to work on, and what you can leave and what's working fine.
Awesome. And I think that freeing up time is a big one. Once you have a lot of those mundane tasks sort of taken care of, or they're happening more quickly, you then have time to strategize and work on other parts of your business that maybe have been a bit neglected.
That's right. And once you've got proper systems in place, you can then get proper reports. And you can have accurate, timely reports, which can give you a full overview of how the business is doing. And then you can take action on that. And if you're on top of your reports and you're getting live data, you can make decisions to prevent issues in the future.
Yeah, sounds like what we are always saying at Syft. Oh, that's awesome. Why do you think consistency is important in the running of your business?
Okay, so let's perhaps, to answer that question, think about what makes franchises work so well. So what makes a McDonald's a McDonald's? It's consistency. When you order a Big Mac at a McDonald's in South Africa, it's going to look and taste very similar no matter which McDonald's you go to.
Right.
And they've got a system in place for preparing that burger, and the customer knows what to expect, and the system they've got works like a well-oiled machine. When you order from McDonald's, their system will tell the cashier to upsell an item. So that system and that consistency increases their revenue on a consistent basis. So most franchises have manuals and they have processes for everything. Someone can take those manuals and those processes and they can replicate them. And in the example of a McDonald's, they can create a whole new McDonald's from scratch that produces food exactly like the McDonald's in the next suburb just by using those manuals. So just like consistent recurring investments are important to revenue for an investor, so a system that's consistent can create larger revenue streams for a business owner. So consistency is absolutely important in running a business.
I think the McDonald's is such a good example, because that is exactly, no matter where you are, you know what you're getting, you know what it's going to look like, it's going to taste the same, the experience is going to be the same. So they found a way, like you said, to be able to replicate that quite easily.
Yes, that's right. I'm not sure if you've seen the McDonald's movie about the guy who started the McDonald's, but in that movie, it's quite clear that when the founder starts to franchise the business, things start to go wrong because there are no processes in place. And so that really brings out the point that consistency and processes are very important. So if you haven't seen the movie, go ahead and watch it. It's quite an education.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So when do you think that business owners should start considering systemizing their processes? Is it when, like in the case of McDonald's, they're starting to open up more franchises and they want to have some consistency? Or is it sort of different for different businesses?
So systems should be introduced from the very beginning, from day one. The sooner it's done, the easier it is to grow the business and the more data they'll have to help make decisions in the future. So just because they start with one system, it doesn't mean they can't change in the future. But it's very important to have the right systems in place when they begin. Processes might take a bit longer to optimize. Sometimes a process might need to be evaluated and refined before they're introduced to the rest of the business or before process documents are drawn up. So I think we can maybe split systems and processes. Systems should be in place from the very beginning, but processes might take a bit longer to optimize.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If you're a startup, you're not going to have all those processes from the beginning. You're trying to figure out what works, who's doing what, all of that kind of thing. But if you have good systems, good software in place from the beginning, I think you're starting off on a strong foot.
That's right. That's right. And I see a lot of companies that either decide to buy the most expensive software, and that can lead to their downfall because it's too complicated to understand and it's too costly to maintain. And on the other hand, I see companies that try and get away with free software or software that costs very little but doesn't fulfill their needs. So it's very important to evaluate the business and decide on the correct software. And that's something that I do on a day-to-day basis. That's the kind of consultations I have with businesses to determine their needs and choose the right software for them.
That makes sense. I think a lot of the time people will go for these expensive solutions because they think, oh, because the solution's expensive, it must be the best. It must fit every need. But sometimes you don't actually need half of the things that are part of that solution, and you're just spending all of your money on this.
That's right. So I've got some very big clients, well-known brand names in South Africa, that use software that costs about 400 Rand a month, which I think is about $22. And yet very big brands can run their software on that. So you don't need expensive software. It all depends on what kind of functions and the capabilities that the software can provide.
So when you look at something like accounting or payroll software, how should you choose which software is right for your needs?
So there isn't an accounting system or payroll system that will work for every business. I know that the software companies I work with probably would say differently, but I work with this every day, and that's why I'm trained on a variety of software systems. So some of the questions that I would ask to determine the accounting software that's needed would be, what system are you using now? And I'd ask that to check the ease of conversion and what functionality is being used at the moment. I would find out what system the company has used in the past to check how much training is needed, how many users they would need, because different accounting systems can accommodate different numbers of users, and it can also affect the price. I would find out how many companies they want to manage, because some accounting softwares charge per company and some don't. A very important question to ask, especially in countries like South Africa, is do you have a stable internet connection? And that's to determine if they can, in fact, use cloud accounting systems. There's obviously no point in them purchasing cloud accounting software if they're in a place with very bad internet. I would find out if they have users that need to work remotely, again, to find out if cloud software is best for them. I would need to find out if their computers have been networked, especially for on-premise software, and what kind of functionality they need, especially when it comes to inventory. Do they work with multiple warehouses? Do they need multiple currencies? Because that affects the type of program as well as the price. Then when it comes to payroll software, I would also find out what system they're using at the moment, again, to check the ease of conversion and what functionality they use at the moment. I would find out how many employees there are, because that affects the price and also the type of system that's used. Some payroll programs can only handle a limited number of employees. I would then need to find out if they need any kind of self-service system to manage leave or log claims, and if they need any other kind of HR features, such as recruitment, timesheets, expense claims, training, or managing their skills. And just like the accounting software, I would need to find out if they have a stable internet connection and if they have users who need to work remotely. Because the same applies to payroll software. There's on-premise software and cloud software.
Makes sense. I think a lot of the time when we hear about cloud, everyone says, oh, cloud is the best. And cloud is great. There's a lot you can do with it. But sometimes it's just not the right thing for you. If you don't have a stable internet connection, cloud is not going to work very well.
That's right. I've got a client, in fact, that is in our city here, but unfortunately they're in a place with very bad internet connection and they don't have fiber, and they are reliant on a cell phone tower which gives them 3G connection, and it drops every now and then. And so unfortunately they can't use cloud software at the moment. They'll have to wait until fiber gets installed in the area.
And so if we look at the sort of journey of taking on the software, once you've implemented your new software, how do you know when it's time to upgrade?
Okay, so when you feel that you've outgrown the software, that is when you need to consider upgrading it. So it's when you have too many workarounds or you need custom developed software to manage processes. So a company needs to consider whether they are approaching developers too often to customize pieces of software, or if they are using programs outside of the system. For example, Excel. If they are using a lot of Excel spreadsheets, the chances are they need to upgrade their system because it's important to have as much information in one system as possible. Of course, some softwares allow upgrading for free. So if there is a new build of your existing software and it's free, then you should definitely do the upgrade as soon as possible. But if you've outgrown your existing system and want to move to a completely new system, then you would need to consider if you've outgrown what you're currently using.
And then in terms of a lot of apps work well together, sort of within an ecosystem, I was wondering, how do you approach the app ecosystem as a business owner? How do you know where to start, how many apps you need? What would be your recommendation for business owners who are trying to figure out which apps they actually need to use?
Okay, so they would need to start with the business needs. Look at what functionality is missing, and then find an app that plugs the gaps. Some apps provide free limited functionality, but a lot needs to be paid for. And as I said earlier, it's best to keep as much as possible in as little systems as possible. So I would recommend that they start with a product that provides as much functionality as they can get, and then only purchase apps to fill the gaps.
Yeah, makes sense. If you can have everything in one place instead of having like 5 different apps, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's right. So they should really look for the biggest gaps where there's a lot of time being spent that could be put into other more profitable places. For example, reporting. There's no point spending hours or days each month manually creating a report in Excel when you could sign up to a reporting software like Syft and get the reports within seconds or even scheduled to be sent on a regular basis. So companies need to look at the cost of doing a task manually and ask if they would save money and time by using an app. It pays to set aside some time to research the apps. You may need to try a few before you find one that works for you.
And when you come across business owners who are maybe quite old school, who don't really like using technology, how do you approach them? How do you sort of show them the power of systems and software?
So most business owners are profit driven, and I use that to my advantage. So I would show them how they can make more money using software
Right.
and tools. I'd show them the benefits, the money they will make, the time they will save. And fear is a very powerful emotion. And I would normally help them to realize that it's a very quick path to obsolescence. Just look at companies like Kodak, Nokia, or BlackBerry. And with the rise of AI, any companies that rely on repetitive processes will become obsolete and lose any competitive edge they may have.
Sure, it's the carrot and the stick method. You've got, look at all this money you can make, but also if you don't do it, you will go out of business.
Absolutely. The carrot and the stick.
I guess another question I have in terms of the saving time with software, how can businesses save time on posting source documents if they use software?
So there's quite a few apps that can be used for this, such as Auto Entry by Sage or Dext. And these kinds of software can scan documents, such as invoices or statements. There's often the option to upload a document at a total level or upload the individual line items. And to get those documents into the accounting system, they can either be emailed to a dedicated email address or uploaded directly. And that can save a huge amount of time. Most accounting systems have built-in bank feed functionality where bank statements can automatically be imported into the system either daily or on demand. Furthermore, rules can be created so that the accounting system recognizes repeat transactions based on the description and sometimes the amount and can automatically allocate it. I believe that most businesses can create bank rules for about 60% of their transactions at least. Doing
Wow.
that saves a huge amount of time and frustration and leads to greater accuracy because the numbers are not being entered manually. A lot of accounting systems have a direct link to the bank, which means less errors and a seamless connection. Those that don't have a direct bank connection use a third party, such as one called Yodlee. In that case, the statement data goes from the bank to the third party, which decodes the data and sends it to the accounting system. And although that can sometimes mean that the bank feed doesn't always work as well, the third parties are usually on top of most cases and resolve them fairly well and fairly quickly. Errors happen though when the bank changes the layout of their internet banking system without the third party being made aware of that. And so these systems are safe and secure, and there's hardly any risk that your online banking details could be compromised. Just remember that the banks wouldn't allow bank feeds if that was the case.
No, absolutely. I think that's always really important. And one of the big fears that people have with bringing on new software, especially with financial data, you want to make sure that your data is secure so that obviously you're benefiting, you're getting all the time saving, but everything is still fine, still safe.
Absolutely. And it is important to do your research on those things. Use well-known software that has been reviewed and that is in use by other companies that you know.
Definitely. And then something I was wondering about, how do you know when you should outsource a task versus when you should try and do the work internally?
That's a very good question. And as I said in my introduction, we do outsourced payroll for a number of our clients, but we also support clients that want to do payroll themselves, and we provide them with those payroll systems. And it all comes down to cost. If a business can save money by outsourcing the work rather than paying someone to do it, then it should be outsourced. So companies should focus on their core activities and outsource everything else. There's a saying that you should work in your flame, not in your wax. So that means you should do the things you love and get someone else to do the things you don't. It could mean employing someone, or it could mean outsourcing the work. For example, a marketing company should consider outsourcing their accounting work, and an accounting company should consider outsourcing their marketing. So when a company doesn't have the skills internally, that's another time they can look at outsourcing. The outsourced company specializes in that service they provide. For example, if the payroll function is outsourced, that payroll company would usually have specialist payroll and tax knowledge and can make sure the payroll's done correctly the first time. That saves time because the employees spend less time researching and doing training. And it also prevents costly errors, which could lead to penalties and interest from the tax authority. And there's another quote, and I'll shorten the original one. A jack of all trades is a master of none. If a business tries to do everything, they won't have the time or energy to focus on the product or service that they're trying to sell. So now let's build on that. The full quote is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oft times better than a master of one. And it's good to have a few skills, but a company does need to define its focus and determine what it wants to do internally and what is most effective to outsource. And outsourcing can be a lot more affordable than most people think. So get a quote, compare to what it costs in both time and money to do this internally, and then decide.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you did the first part of the quote, which so many people think is actually the whole quote, and then the full quote. Because really, yeah, it is important to be able to know what your strengths are, to focus there, outsource when you need to, but also you don't want to be limited to say, okay, I'm an accountant, I know my debits and credits. No, you can actually obviously learn so much more than that. But definitely, if you want to focus on your flame and not on your wax, then it's good to consider where you might benefit from outsourcing some of those tasks that are really taking you a long time, you're not doing them very well, and that could incur penalties.
That's right, especially for business owners. You know, if you
Yes.
own a business, you want to enjoy the work you do. So you don't want to come to work and face doing something that you don't enjoy. That's something that should be outsourced.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, we've spoken about a lot today about systemizing your business, about knowing when to outsource, when to do something internally, figuring out which software works for you, and the importance of having processes in place. So I think I'm going to leave you with one last question, Travis, which is, if someone were to just take away one thing from today's podcast, what would you like them to take away?
It's important to make a well-informed choice when choosing a system. So rather than jumping into something straight away, it's important to consider what you're doing. So look at the pros and cons of different software and analyze it and think about it carefully. Because once you start using a system, moving away from it is it can be a costly task, and it takes a lot of time and money to do so. I've seen a lot of clients change accounting software without looking at all the options. I've seen salespeople sell software that isn't really right for the business, and the salesperson jumps off as soon as they've sold the software, and then the implementation team comes on, and that's when it all falls apart. And unfortunately, I've seen so many businesses convert from one software to another, only to realize that it's not working, and then revert back to the old software they were using. And by then, they've already paid for the new software. They can't get a refund. They've paid for training. They've used all the time, and by then it's too late. So the one important piece of advice I would give to someone is consider your options very carefully. And if possible, get someone like me, a systems consultant, to come and give a consultation to you to advise you on the best software to use. A lot of companies like mine, Trailblazer Systems, we do such consultations for free. So we don't charge to give that kind of advice.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Travis. Thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast and for sharing a bit about your background and your experiences. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.
Pleasure. That's great. The time's gone so fast, and I've really enjoyed it.
So thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Alex.
everyone for watching.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast.
Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now.
And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast.
That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.